Hello and welcome to another video. So today we're taking a look at a Ramp Dragon list. Ramp Dragon has been performing pretty averagely across the board as far as decks go, and is still on the expensive end as far as legendaries go, as all Ramp Dragons typically are, unfortunately. I've had a rough time with a lot of decks in the last few days, I'm going to be honest with you. It's kind of also why the videos are slowed down to about one every second day at this point, because I'm really struggling to find decks that, one, I haven't already covered pretty extensively, or two, just rehashes of old decks and that will still perform okay. And this is one of the few where it's like, this has been distilled down a little bit, has a couple of different cards in it, but is still performing okay, which is good. So overall, this deck has been great for me. It's got me out of a little bit of a slump. Not perfectly, but enough. I was kind of going on some massive losing streaks, even with the aggro pushing decks. It just wasn't doing it for me in the last 2 days, for whatever reason. But this Ramp Dragon, I've been able to pick up at least over a 50% win rate, which I'm pretty happy with, considering how awful my last 2 days have been. But we have Striker Dragon, Bell, then we have Searing, Apollo, all pretty standard early game cards. Dragon Sign for your ramp, Gold Note for your draw. The only real new card in this deck that's kind of interesting is White Scale Herald. It's a heal card, mostly because aggro is so prevalent. Having a little bit of heal doesn't hurt. We've also got a bump to Olivia 2, Burnite 2, Gyaru 3, Ruler Kakaitis 1, and then our top end, obviously Genesis and Twilight for big Storm and big Clear, and then Forte again for more Storm. Really just all around a solid deck, does really well, and is pretty brain dead to play. It's basically curve out and then drop your big things every turn until you kill your opponent, so we're going to get right into it and take a look. So my first matchup here is against Runecraft. Runecraft is still reasonably popular and still performing reasonably well from what I've seen on ladder currently. There are a lot of variations to Runecraft as well now as far as what they are playing. I've even seen some Earthright runes come in. So we start off with a pretty okay hand, a couple of early drops and a couple of ramp cards. It's usually what I like to look for in my starting hands. If I have a couple of cards that let me control the early game and then a couple of cards that let me ramp up into my mid game faster, it's always a nice spot to be. So I go for a simple Foresight Stormy Blast play for turn 2. Really not a bad turn 2 play, but that does leave us free to just ramp for turn 3. And we end up finding our Genesis Dragon as well, so another big hitter to go along with the Twilight Dragon. And a second Twilight Dragon. So now it is just like ramping out, holding out. I decided to dump the 1-2 Apollo there because Apollo's not that important against Rune, and it's just something that I can at least put to board. Try and bait out some cards potentially is what I really wanted to do there. Then we get our big ramp card, big gold, nice 5/5 stat line. Gets us to our mid game really casually. And it does mean we're looking at a free Evo on the other Lifu next turn, and we could even drop Apollo alongside it if we need to. But given what we have currently, we're not really in too bad a spot, so I don't have to worry too much. So I decided to just ramp. We max out and get our extra draw. We now have Olivia as well, which sets us up really nicely. And Twilight Dragon is going to be a really solid clear, given that they go for Kun on turn 6. So we're going to get a full clear here, no issue at all. Even if we have to eat 10 damage, well, 11 damage to face for that turn. Which is kind of brutal, but until they get to like turn 10, they're not really storming me down super fast. So I decided to drop the Twilight with the Evo for extra draw here, try and get some more cards. We end up with a lot of Genesis Dragons to work from. And we end up having to deal with another Stormy Blast, which was just enough to clear that. Super unfortunate. They do decide to early declimb. This isn't really a surprise, given that they've seen me go complete ramp here. They're going to kind of just be looking for as many cards as they can to flood the board and hope that I just can't keep removing them. Fortunately for us though, second Twilight really does do a good job here. I go for a normal Evo point on this one, just to make it threatening again. Because we are threatening lethal every turn, basically, with this. Since Genesis Dragon can potentially get us there. But they play another Stormy Blast that's exactly perfect for killing my 11. So I decided to drop the Olivia. We've actually got some alright cards here with Fledgling Dragon Slayer as well. We did overdraw a little, but I think that's okay. So we go for the complete full clear there. Probably unnecessary, but I also wanted to free up some hand space as well, so while sticking some more cards to board. William unfortunately does clear us there though. So I look for some healing. We end up with Burnite. We end up just sacking a Genesis here. We have 3 of them. I'm not too concerned with sacking one. Unfortunately, now we're really playing the long game, because there's really not a lot we can do, so we're just kind of waiting them out as much as possible. Gyaru is looking like a pretty promising drop next turn though, given that I have to deal with this Kun in some capacity. Although a second Burnite really does do the job quite nicely, avoiding having to use the Evo point. Plus we can even drop a 2-drop alongside this quite comfortably. No point dropping Apollo yet. Plus I'd rather get more draw at this point. So we do see them go for that second dimensional climb. Plus their burn there. And another Kun. They really have just played all their Kuns at this point. Which is really good for us because we're still up at Evo point. And they are going to struggle to hurt us from here. Getting 8 damage out of this is only really possible with Cocytus. So we are going to go for a complete clear here. Gyaru is going to allow us to wipe the board completely while hitting them in the face with the 7-2 Burnite. Getting us that damage we need to get close to the Genesis play. Especially with a board that's reasonably sticky now and not easy to remove. Which is why we end up seeing the concede. Obviously we're out of removal now. Alright, and next up, Abyss, a deck that is making waves in the current meta. Starting out as a craft that really wasn't doing well, was really, really rough, but I think the current builds are really solid. It's definitely a mid-range deck, but it does feel very heavy on aggro early and then relies really well on the late-game damage bursts with things like Cerberus and potentially even Medusa just as a threatening card. So we are seeing more and more Abyss players, and we are seeing more and more people really doing well with the deck. Which is nice to see, but I am a little concerned that, considering where Abyss was at the start and where it is now, the first expansion, if they get some good cards, could really propel that to a tier 1 deck pretty easily, I think. So we don't really do too much in this early game here. We basically just ramped as much as possible while controlling the early board. It's not until we really get to that mid to late game that we're going to really do anything impactful against Abyss here, but since we are entering mid game basically this turn / next turn, like, we're in a pretty good spot. Lesser Mummy is a little annoying, but not something we can't deal with. I decided to just drop Forte and go face. This is a really nice damage turn. We do have to leave up the 4-4, which we have to eat the damage off, but I think that's okay if I can stick a 7-4 to board, especially going into turn 7, where we've got a few options we can do here. They do play the Lionheart, which is a free clear. Fortunately for me, I also have a few good ways to do clear here. I mean, not the best ways in the world, but definitely, you know, gets us there. And unfortunately, I can't afford to keep taking damage. If I could have afforded to keep taking damage, I would have, but that was not a good spot to have to keep taking the damage from. And we do have the Gyaru now, since we did get the extra Evo point off the gold. They did go for the Olivia, which, like I said, is not bad for us here, especially since they obviously missed the 2-drop Olivia play. They just didn't have it, which was huge. So I decided to just pump some healing, play Fledgling Dragon Slayer and clear up and hold on to our Evo points for this turn. I'm expecting a Cerberus relatively soon, given that they're going into turn 8 next turn. And now I do have to unfortunately deal with this. Lucky for us, Twilight Dragon's pretty threatening, especially with Evo, putting them within lethal range of it. Basically saying, hey, deal with my Twilight Dragon or potentially lose the game. So they decide to go for some damage. They do get their Departed, which is pretty good here, since it is just free removal, basically. And now we are pretty much forced into a Gyaru play, which isn't what I want to do, considering we're kind of looking at having to deal with a Cerberus in the next turn, probably, given that they still have a Super Evo. Lucky for me, Gyaru is pretty sticky, and even Cerberus is going to have trouble full clearing it easily, thanks to the high-end stat lines. And we have got some removal options next turn, and even if we don't, as long as they don't overheal, we can just kill them with the Genesis Dragon. Although I think they can get out of range here with the 1-2. that puts us just out of range of Genesis, but fortunately, since they can't kill the 5/4, that does give us lethal. Genesis plus the 5/4 for 14 damage, game.
No, this is all wrong.
And last but not least, we have an Aggro Dragon matchup here. So Aggro Dragon actually can be a little bit of a problem for this deck. If they just develop board faster than you can clear, you will just die. You have this similar problem against Sword. So I am more 50-50 on which way these matches typically go. I usually want to search for as much early removal cards as I could, as you can see here, which is why we're featuring this match, because finding those early removal cards are very important. That isn't always the case either. That does require them to basically draw really well as well here. Since they didn't draw super crazy, it's really not that important for me. So they end up just playing the Searings. 2 Searings to board here is actually fine for me. I can actually double Searing in retaliation and strike to completely clear and leave up my 2 bodies. Which is more than enough here for me to actually start threatening them with some cards. Especially since we did draw a Gyaro as well. And we did manage to find some ramp as well early, which is always really good in this deck. You want that early ramp as quickly as you kind of can get it. Unfortunately, seeing Apollo get full clear kind of hurts my feelings a little bit. But we have stuff like Fledgling. We just drew our gold, which is a huge value here, since now this does make Gyaru potentially alive in the next turn, although without Super Evolve, making Gyaru alive is kind of pointless, so yeah, it's fine, but we have plenty of removal in hand, so I'm not too concerned. So this is looking like a solid board to potentially drop Apollo plus Strike on, since that will completely wipe here. Or maybe even just Apollo Evo. But I end up throwing Gyaru to board because I obviously just completely missed the fact that I don't have Super Evo yet. Basically misplaying it, so I end up just making the best of it by Evoing the ward, taking the damage, and hoping to stick Gyaru till next turn. Because if Gyaru does stick, it is really good. It's just unfortunate that I kind of misplayed here. And I mean, it happens. Sometimes you misplay, sometimes you don't. Like, I would have been better off just Apollo striking, I think, and holding Gyaru, but worked out in my favor in the end because they didn't end up clearing the Gyaru, so I end up just sending the Evo on it to get the extra damage and getting the barrier on the 5/3 and potentially setting up lethal in the following turn. Since I betted on the fact that Dragon really can't do 10 damage by, you know, 8 play points. I know roughly what Aggro Dragon can dish out, and 10 damage is kind of just out of range of what they can normally do. Basically just giving us the win there. So overall, Ramp Dragon has definitely become one of the decks that I end up falling back on quite a bit, especially when I feel like I'm having a rough time on ladder. It's reasonably casual, don't have to think too hard, and it does do fairly well. And the fact that, you know, it's just really big drops continuously really forces your opponent to have to think more than you do, which is always good. But overall, yeah, it's a fun deck. I always enjoy it. I've never had a bad time playing Ramp Dragon in Worlds Beyond. So, definitely fun. I highly recommend it if you have the cards to build it. If not, that's kind of unfortunate. This deck is just really expensive, and there's not a lot you can do about it. Like, you can mess with some of these ratios on cards. You could probably even drop Kakaitas and be fine, but, you know, it's a rough one in that sense. So, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Until next time, guys, I'll see you then.